Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to call this meeting of the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee to order. I'd like to start, as I do in all respective hearings, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are with me. I'll start with the veteran of the respective committee, Senator George Edwards. I also have Senator Michael Jackson, and we're also with Senator Johnny Ray Sailing at this moment. Today we'll hear, it looks like, three respective committee analyst reports, MSOF, MDOT WMATA, and MDOT Motor Vehicle Administration. And at this time, I'd like to bring up Madeline Miller to give the analyst for MSOF.
Do I need to press this?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fiscal 2023 allowance for the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operations Fund provides $86.1 million in total expenditures. Those are shown on page 3. Here's a breakdown for each of the entities that receive MEMSOF funds. Those entities are the Senator William H. Amos Fire Rescue and Ambulance Fund, or AMIS Fund, the Maryland Fire and Rescue Initiative, the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, the Maryland State Police Aviation Command, and the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center. In the allowance, MSPAC receives the most funds at $39.2 million, or 46% of the total. MSPAC is funded about 80% with MEMSOF funds, with the rest coming from general. MIMS receives 21% at $17.6 million. The AMOS Fund receives $15 million annually, and MIFRI and the Shock Trauma Center receive 12% and 4% of total expenditures, respectively. Exhibit 2 shows MEMSOF expenditures over the last 3 years. Total expenditures grow 5.7% in fiscal 2023, mostly attributable to the employee compensation enhancements, including increments and cost of living adjustments. There are a couple notable exceptions, however. The 17.9% increase for MIFRI is likely an overstatement. MIFRI is anticipated to use about $835,000 in funds previously made available to it during the fiscal 2022. Therefore, growth between the working appropriation and the allowance is overstated. Secondly, the $100,000 increase for the Shock Trauma Center is in line with the administration's expressed intent to increase the grant to $3.7 million by fiscal 2023 from $3.2 million as set as the minimum grant in Chapter 429 of 2013. Exhibit 3 shows historical revenues and expenditures for the fund. Between fiscal 2014 and 2017, revenues outpaced expenditures by an average of $7.6 million annually, following an increase in the MVA registration fee in 2014. Fund expenditures outpaced revenue in fiscal 2018, largely due to MSPAC operating expenses and a communication system upgrade for MIMS. Annual deficits have continued since 2018, though estimated revenues improved in fiscal 2021 compared with 2020. The increase in revenues is largely the result of the MVA reopening. MVA registration fees could not be collected during spring 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. During the 2021 legislative session, DLS projected that fiscal 2021 revenues would be about $77.6 million. Exhibit 4 shows that the actual revenues were only about $76 million. This shows the continued impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on MEMSOF revenue sources. In particular, revenue from moving violation citations fell another 37.5% in fiscal 21 compared to actual spending in fiscal 2020. As will be discussed in a few minutes, DLS now projects revenues to return to or surpass their pre-pandemic levels during fiscal 2022. However, the structural deficit will increase as expenditures also grow. Exhibit 5 describes the assumptions made by DLS when creating its MEMSOF forecast and shows how they differ from those made by the Department of Budget and Management. DLS uses a 10-year average growth rate compared to a 3-year average used by DBM. Another major difference is that the DLS forecast includes personnel salary enhancements and expenditures for MIFRE, MIMS, and MSPAC. DLS forecast is shown in Exhibit 6, and DBMs can be found in Appendix 2. DBM anticipates that the fund will be insolvent by the end of fiscal 2025, while DLS only anticipates that the fund will be solvent through fiscal 2023, becoming insolvent in 2024. This is a year earlier than was projected by DLS during the fiscal 2021 and fiscal 2022 forecasts. Insolvency is pending despite a projected growth in revenues in the working appropriation. The DLS forecast shows that from fiscal 23 through 2028, registration revenues, the MVA registration fees, will have a growth rate of 1.04%, including a 1.2% increase in fiscal 2022 as car sales recover following the pandemic. DLS also anticipates a one-time boost in moving violation surcharge revenues in fiscal 2022 as pre-pandemic activities resume. Growth in expenditures outpaces that of revenues, as shown in Exhibit 7. This spending gap is projected to grow over time to $23.4 million by fiscal 2028. To continue supporting the entities traditionally funded wholly or partially with MEMSOF special funds, $7.8 million in general funds may be required in fiscal 2024. To keep pace with rising costs, the General Assembly will need to consider fee increases or other revenue enhancements to sustain current levels of MEMSOF-supported operations. This will require separate legislation. DLS recommends that the General Assembly consider such legislation no later than the 2023 session. Before I take questions, I'd also like to note that no maintenance of effort penalties were imposed on jurisdictions receiving AMIS funds in fiscal 2022. The two jurisdictions, Baltimore City and Montgomery County, failed to meet the appropriate standard. No penalty will be enforced. A jurisdiction must fail to meet the MOE for 2 years and also fail to receive a waiver from the General Assembly or the Board of Public Works in order to receive a penalty. Thank you very much for your time today. That concludes my budget overview.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. It looks like we have a question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you repeat the last portion of what you stated about the maintenance of effort requirement, and in particular, if there's a obviously we would have hoped that we wouldn't be wearing masks today, but when we have these maintenance of efforts issues, is there a timeline associated with that? You said there were two jurisdictions that did not meet the requirement.
Yes. So two jurisdictions failed to meet the fiscal 2020 maintenance of effort standard. So I believe the maintenance of effort standard is calculated based on a 3-year average of prior expenditures for each jurisdiction. So this means that two jurisdictions failed to meet the amount of spending that would have been established from that 3-year average. However, that will not create a penalty during fiscal 2022 because it was only 1 year, and the Public Safety Article 8, Section 8-104 of the Public Safety Article requires that the jurisdiction either fail for 2 consecutive years and fail to get a waiver.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions at this moment, we'll bring up the department, Mr. Clay Stamp, the chairman for MEMSOF, and Dr. Theodore Delbridge and their team.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I bring greetings from Clay Stamp, the chairman of the EMS board. Clay is the county manager for Talbot County and was detained with some county business late this morning, and so won't be here to greet you all. He does wish for me to convey to you, however, note that the MSOF is a product of the legislator that has lasted 30 years and has funded the EMS system in Maryland extraordinarily well in terms of creating a coalition of resources that make Maryland amongst the best in the United States. And we note Ms. Miller's analysis and her prediction that we will need legislative action in the next coming years in order to sustain the MSOF, and look forward to working with you to make that happen. I'm Ted Delbridge, Dr. Ted Delbridge. I'm the Executive Director for MEMS, the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems. We are responsible for coordinating the statewide EMS system, and we do that through promulgating clinical protocols and medical direction, licensing and certifying EMS clinicians, supporting EMS education programs, licensing commercial ambulance services, and maintaining and operating a statewide EMS communications network. Thanks, Ms. Miller, for comprehensive analysis, and also to Rebecca Bazzari, our DBM budget analyst who's assigned to MEMS. And I, too, would like to say thank you to the legislator for creating the MSOF as a distinct and sustainable resource of funding for the various components of the statewide EMS system, some of whom you'll also hear from this afternoon, and also for continuing to support the EMS system as funding, which clearly benefits every single Marylander at some point or another. Except for some grant funding, MEMS budget is nearly entirely derived from the MSOF. For the past year, we've been particularly focused on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I won't go into great detail, but we've used the latitudes provided by the governor's declarations of emergency to credential provisional EMS clinicians, more than 1,200 people, and created a regulatory pathway for them to become regularly certified and licensed folks. We've changed requirements for commercial ambulance services to ensure that their fleet is expanded to meet the demands of the community. And we've developed paramedics and EMTs as vaccinators. And over the past year, EMTs and paramedics have vaccinated more than 80,000 members of the public, more than 20,000 members of public safety agencies and the government in continuity of operations efforts. We created a model critical care coordination center, one of a few in the country, that attempts to match patients' critical care needs with the resources available. These are people who are in the hospital emergency department and can't get the care they need because the resource isn't available where they are, and we find a place for them to go. So the ongoing work and innovation that continuously improves the emergency medical care available to all Marylanders is made possible by the EMS Operations Fund, and we, along with our partners, our coalition, really look forward to working with the legislator in the next year or so to sustain the fund and make it continue to operate on behalf of all the Marylanders. And I'm happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you, Mr. Delbridge. My first question, could you speak to the communication to the two jurisdictions that didn't meet the maintenance of effort?
The AMIS fund is administered by the Maryland Emergency Management, or Department of Emergency Management now, via the Emergency Management Agency. So that would be in their bailiwick to talk about.
So the two jurisdictions that didn't meet the maintenance of effort don't fall under your purview, is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any questions by the respective other committee members? Seeing none, this ends the budget hearing for Maryland Emergency Medical System Operation Fund. Next, we'll pull up Steve McCulloch for the MDOT WMATA budget.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Steve McCulloch from the Department of Legislative Services here to present the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA, budget analysis. Jumping right to a chart that you've probably seen regularly over the past year and a half. This shows the impact of the COVID pandemic on ridership. I'm sorry? I believe that that's the only screen that works. That one's for the, I don't, yeah. Do you need the? So this is on page 5 of the analysis. And Chairman, he's got, also needs packet. Apparently the screen is not on in front.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, so Exhibit 1 shows the COVID ridership, impact on ridership of the pandemic, and it compares for Metro Rail and Metro Bus ridership compared to 2019, which is pre-pandemic. And as you can see, early in the pandemic, ridership really plummeted. It has been increasing generally since that point. However, as you can see, as of October, it was still well below pre-pandemic levels. Looking at ridership on a fiscal year basis, you see the same impact, with 2021 having been affected for a full year of the pandemic, whereas fiscal 2020 was only the final quarter of that fiscal year, fell within the pandemic. And ridership, did plummet. The estimate is that it will improve for fiscal 2022. However, it is still projected to be well below pre-pandemic levels. That translates also when we look at performance measures for the system. These charts look at revenue miles, the number of passengers per revenue mile, the operating expenses, and the operating cost per passenger trip. And as you can see, reduced passengers, especially on this final column, the reduced ridership, because there are fixed costs of the service, makes the operating cost per passenger trip really increase for both Metro Rail and Metro Bus. That also then translates through to the fare box recovery rates. Fare box recovery is the amount of revenue raised through the fares for the system compared with the total operating cost for the system. And again, in fiscal 2021, it is much lower than in prior years. You can see for rail, prior to the pandemic, it was above 50% was being recovered from fares, and now it is less than 10. So that really shows how not only ridership but the revenues of the agency have been impacted. Exhibit 5 shows the overview of the agency spending for both capital and operating for fiscal 2023, with the smaller colored slices showing the Maryland share of the subsidy of each of those portions of the total budget. And as you can see, capital is slightly more than 50% of spending, and Maryland's share of the capital about 14%, with the share of the operating at just under 20%. So the WMATA fiscal 2023 budget does have some assumptions baked in. They're using just over $715 million of federal stimulus funding to help support operations and replace those revenues that we saw on the fare box recovery that had declined. There is an expectation that the second phase of the Silver Line will open for service, and that does increase total operating costs for the system, and Maryland's share will increase by $13.5 million when that happens as well. And then the budget does continue the same revenue, the fare policies that have been put in place for the current year, some flat rate bus and rail, weekend fares, and other things designed to help try to bring ridership back up. Exhibit 6 looks at the operating expenses by category compares fiscal 2022, the current year, with the allowance year. As you can see, the total operating budget is $2.3 billion, and the largest share for WMATA is in personnel, as are, all transit systems are generally, the biggest expense is personnel. Exhibit 7 shows how the operating budget is being funded. And in past pre-pandemic years, essentially it would be operating revenues would be shown on the left, and everything else that was not covered through operating revenues would be covered by the three funding jurisdictions, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. For fiscal 2023, you can see that, again, that federal aid makes up a significant piece of the funding for the operating budget, and that keeps the local jurisdiction share from being even greater than it would otherwise be. Looking now at the PAYGO capital program, as you, I'm sure, aware, chapters 351 and 352 of 2018 did establish a dedicated capital grant to WMATA from the 3 jurisdictions totaling $500 million per year. Maryland's share of that is $167 million per year. There is also a base capital grant that WMATA receives funding from the 3 funding jurisdictions. And that same legislation from 2018 does establish procedures for triggering that base capital to be a mandated appropriation. And this is triggered for the first time in fiscal 2023. Essentially, it required WMATA to provide the state with certain data and reports, and then the Department of Transportation had to certify in writing to the governor prior to the beginning of the fiscal year that this information had been received. What that does is then makes the full capital grant to WMATA essentially a mandated appropriation going forward, as long as they maintain that reporting of the data that's required. Exhibit 8 shows the Maryland CTP, or Consolidated Transportation Program, summary for WMATA. And those first 3 lines on Exhibit 8 are what comprise the base capital funding, but the first line also includes the federal funds that WMATA receives directly that would be attributable to Maryland. So when you back those out, those shown on the very bottom line shows the base capital from the state funds, and as required going forward, that base capital amount is increasing by 3% pursuant to that legislation. Exhibit 9 shows the 6-year plan for capital for WMATA in terms of how it's going to be funded. A debt will comprise about 42% of the funding, the state and local contributions about an equal amount, with federal funding bringing up most of the additional funding over the 6-year period. Exhibit 10 shows the fiscal 2023 capital program, which totals $2.4 billion, and sorts it out by categories. You see here the rail cars, rail systems, stations, etc. Exhibit 11 then takes that $2.4 billion and indicates where the sources are of funding are from. In the federal funds, there are general federal formula programs, and then there was the Federal Passenger Rail Investment Improvement Act, which is then matched by the 3 funding jurisdictions. So the second column on this page shows the Maryland share for each of these sections, and you can see this $50 million is the match to that $149 million federal grant. The WMATA budget is currently a proposed budget. It has not been approved by the WMATA board, and there is a little bit of timing issues between the Maryland budget and the WMATA budget. Since Maryland's allowance had to be introduced, it's obviously based on this proposed budget. And so every year there's some variance between what's in the Maryland budget and what is assumed in the WMATA budget that will be coming from Maryland. And Exhibit 12 shows the differences between that for both the operating and capital. And as you can see, the Maryland budget is $14 million less than is assumed in the WMATA budget, and the capital has a $4 million overage. Now, the Maryland budget for operating contains just the funding for the capped grant amount going to WMATA. So that legislation in 2018 capped the jurisdictional contributions for operating budget to a 3% growth rate every year. However, there are exclusions that can be on top of that. And so this $14 million variance basically are those legislative exclusions. And the exclusions that are in the WMATA budget for fiscal 2023, the biggest item is the Silver Line Phase 2 opening. And MDOT has advised that because these legislative exclusions are part of the board deliberation for consideration for the approved budget, that once the budget's approved by the WMATA board, at that point, the department would then, if needed to add money, would process a budget amendment to, bring in the additional funding. The one issue raised in the analysis this year relates to the 7000 series rail cars, which I'm sure everybody is aware, but last October, a Blue Line train consisting of 8 7000 series rail cars had a derailment. Upon inspection, it was determined that the cause of the derailment was the wheels on a wheel set moving out from the axles, and that caused it to slip off the track. WMATA began an inspection of the entire 7000 fleet. However, even prior to that inspection becoming complete, the Safety Commission ordered WMATA to remove the 7000 series trains from service. Now, the 7000 series rail cars are the newest series of rail cars for WMATA and comprise about 60% of the WMATA rail fleet. So that was a big impact on service, and as a result, the number of trains being run and the timing between trains caused wait times to increase substantially. In efforts to return 7000 series cars began in December when WMATA started putting some back into service according to a plan that had been approved by the Safety Commission. However, shortly after that effort began, it was put on pause as there were additional questions that came up about how the measurement of these wheels would trigger a car from not being put back into service. And at this point, WMATA is on a 90-day pause where they're not even attempting to return those cars to the service and they're instead focusing on a root cause analysis to figure out what it is that's actually caused those wheel sets to get out of compliance. And as part of an effort to mitigate the decrease in service, they have accelerated the return of the 6000 series cars, which had been taken out of service to address a decoupling issue about 10 months prior to last October. The other item that they are working on is to install or purchase some technology that will allow some real-time measurement of those wheel sets as the cars go over the tracks. So we've asked WMATA to brief the committees on the status of those efforts and what the long-term impact might be of those rail cars being out of service in terms of the impact on ridership, because the longer people have to wait, the less reliable they feel it could be, and they make other decisions for how to get where they need to go. The recommended actions for both the operating and the budget, capital budget portions, is to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. And seeing no questions by the committee, at this time, I'd like to pull up General Manager Paul Weederfield, and it looks like Deputy Secretary Earl Lewis and their team.
Do you know what we need to do here?
So good afternoon. I'm Chair McCray, members of the subcommittee. It's great seeing everybody in person, familiar faces and new faces for the first time. Really appreciate that opportunity. For the record, I'm Earl Lewis, Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. As always, I would like to thank DLS Budget Analyst Mr. Steve McCulloch for his professionalism and partnership throughout the years. I know we've worked together over the years. It's been really a good relationship, and we appreciate that. The last year has been tough for transit systems nationwide, and the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA, is no exception. Just when we thought we were approaching the end of the pandemic, 2 new variants of the COVID-19 virus emerged. This caused businesses to reassess their plans for bringing their workforces back to the office, directly affecting transit use. As quickly as transit ridership started to recover, these variants dampened that growth. Fortunately, relief funding provided by the federal government made it possible for WMATA to insulate its workforce from significant resizing despite continuing revenue shortfalls from the low ridership. As always, the state is committed to ensuring a safe and reliable transit system in the National Capital Region for Maryland citizens and for all the riders of the WMATA system. This is why we and our partners in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the District of Columbia continue to invest significant public funding in WMATA's transit system. This funding subsidizes the operations of Metrorail, Metrobus, and WMATA's paratransit service, Metro Access. For the citizens who use Metro, we must ensure that the system is safe, available, and reliable. Capital investment is important for maintaining that state of good repair. Now in its third year, the dedicated capital funding grant provides WMATA with a guaranteed bondable funding resource. Maryland's contribution, combined with similar grants from the District of Columbia and Virginia, provides WMATA with an annual $500 million to enter the bond market. These funds help generate the assets needed to make critical capital and infrastructure improvements. This year alone, bond-backed debt will provide WMATA with over $1 billion towards its capital improvement program. Nonetheless, in the very near future, WMATA will need to make some tough budget decisions. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the person who will be responsible for making many of those decisions, at least for the next several months, Mr. Paul Wiedefeld, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. MDOT has enjoyed working very closely with Mr. Wiedefeld to create a safe and reliable regional transit system. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. A few things I wanted to go through. One is the impact of the COVID on our agency and on the region, and then go through the operating budget, the capital budget, and then just share some thoughts for the future of the agency. In terms of the pandemic impact, one more. We were very fortunate. We had a pandemic plan that we had already in place when the pandemic actually hit us, and we went right to that plan and started to implement it. And as a result, we've had 97% compliance with either vaccine or testing, which is very, very, very high. Tragically, though, we have lost 8 of our employees due to the virus, and unfortunately just one last week. So it's something that we take, we continue to focus on every minute of the day to try to make sure our employees are safe, which then obviously makes sure that our customers are safe. In terms of ridership, what this chart shows is where we were pre-COVID, at roughly 300 million passengers a year, and the significant drop that we've been through. It is starting to come back, as Steve mentioned, and it's starting to come back right now, relatively slow. We're roughly at 30% pre-COVID levels on the rail side and 60% pre-COVID levels on the bus side of our system. We're projecting that it will continue in fiscal year 23. This is a chart that shows how we monitor literally week to week what's happening on the ridership. So you can see we were heading in the right direction. Again, significantly lower where we were pre-COVID. Then Omicron hit us and it took a dip, but it's starting to come back. In terms of the operating budget, so the pandemic obviously will continue to impact us in the 23 budget. We're assuming a 53% total recovery, meaning combination of bus and rail in fiscal year 23. The board has initiated a number of improvements in both service and fare discounts to try to drive some of the ridership back up, and we are reliant on the federal funds to carry us through fiscal year 23. This chart just gives you a quick summary of the dollars of how we've been using them. I won't go through every one of these numbers. The most important one is when you look down at the second last row, the federal relief row there. And what that is showing is the $700 million roughly that we've been getting for the last 2 years and the $700 million that we expect in 23, that we will have in 23. It's kept us whole, to be frank. We would not have been able to run the service and or keep the 13,000 employees that we have at Metro employed. Here's just some of the things that the board and we've initiated to try to bring back ridership and some estimates of the millions of riders we expect to get from this. Things like a flat fare, a weekend rate, and a lot of this is done because of the different travel market, how we starting to see a change. A number of initiatives to change the pass program. Since people are traveling, 4 and 5 days a week, we had to expand that to make sure they have opportunities to still use those fare media. And then also the board was attempting and has continued to attempt to deal with some of the equity issues. One of those being we used to charge a $2 transfer fee from bus to rail service, and that was eliminated as part of that initiative. Turning to the capital program. This chart gives a sort of a 10-year history of where we've been with the capital program. if you look at roughly the fourth set of bars there in 2015, historically, we had a pattern of, in effect, asking for dollars in the capital program but not delivering. And in 2015, we were delivering roughly 64% of the capital program of what we were asking for. Our team came in, we put a lot of focus on delivering what we were asking for. In the next year, we delivered 84% of the capital program that we asked for. And the next 3 years, we delivered 99%. Next 4 years, we delivered 99% of the program. At the same time, the dedicated revenues came into the system, and in effect, the dollar level that we're spending had almost tripled. This year, fiscal year 21, slipped a bit, just above 90%. Because of COVID in terms of either supply and/or people issues that we had to deal with. So what have we done with these dollars is basically focused on the state of good repair, and it is a combination of, I won't get into all the details of all the different things, but we group them in facilities, systems, vehicles, and things of that sort. And you can see where we've driven it down from roughly $7.1 billion to $3.2 billion in the current capital program. And with the new federal dollars that we anticipate getting with some of the initiatives that have just passed in Congress, we anticipate in effect that 10-year horizon that will drive that down to $1.2 billion. Significant increase in driving down the state of good repair. Here's just a short video of some of the projects that we completed in 21. Very good. So that was what we've achieved in 21. In our current budget, proposed budget, it'll be $2.3 billion. It'll be the largest budget we've had in years, probably since construction, one of the largest in the country in the transit. Again, focusing on state of good repair needs. We will be conducting the phase 4 of the platform improvement program. We've had 3 years of this. We literally shut down stations, get in there and rehab the stations there, in effect, a new station when we leave there. We've done 2 years in Virginia. We did 1 year in Maryland last year, and this year we'll have both Maryland and Virginia projects. We will be beginning major work on the Yellow Line and related bridges and tunnels, so that will have an impact on ridership as we deal with that immediate issues we need to do there. We're also investing in the bus system. We have major bus divisions that we're rehabbing or redoing, basically rebuilding at both Northern and Bladensburg divisions. They're like Kirk Avenue up in Baltimore, 100-year-plus old divisions that we need to replace. And then again, this is all being supported by the dedicated revenue that we received 4 years ago. So what do we get for the dollars? If you follow us at all, several years ago, frequent stories about arcing insulators and different track issues that we've had. We've driven those numbers down. On the right-hand side are a series of metrics that we use in terms of measuring reliability and availability of some of the things we do. And again, they're all pointing in the right direction. So just finally, just wrapping up, we sort of talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities we're facing. Obviously, the pandemic has changed travel behavior across the nation, and particularly in the Washington region. It's particularly acute in the Washington region given the nature of our system, our financial model. Our financial model is different than most other transit systems in that we charge a higher peak fare and we charge by distance of the trip, which is unique in the transit industry in the U.S. So with that, and combine that with the large dependency of the federal workforce, which pre-COVID represented roughly 40% of our rush hour passengers, that's a significant hit on the financial model going forward. At the same time, we're trying to address different equity issues, meaning provide higher quality service, particularly on the bus side of communities that aren't served or are underserved. So those two combinations are really call for a rethinking and opportunity to reimagine what the system can be as the world changes around us and as priorities change within the system, within the region. So that, I think, is what's in front of us going forward. So I'd be glad to take any questions or comments you have.
Thank you, General Manager Weederfield. Looks like we have a question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. Gentlemen, you've been relying upon the $700 million or so from the federal government to stay afloat, and with the 40% reduction in the impact from the federal government employees, from a recovery standpoint, you're looking forward to the FY23 $700+ million. From a recovery standpoint, there are members of the federal government, or there are federal government agencies that are choosing to have employees possibly to stay virtual or to minimize them coming back in, to moving to almost 3 days a week virtual. I sort of have folks in my household who are part of that. So from an impact standpoint on your services and the 700+ that you receive from the federal government, where else do you believe you're going to be able to recover in the midst of, from an operating standpoint? So let's just start there.
Yeah. I think that the region needs to take a hard look at what the levels of service we offer on the rail side and the bus side, given that change. One of the things that we've done already is we started to flatten out. In effect, we've reduced some of the service during the peak period because that's where the demand's down, but we're finding increase in demand in the non-peak as people travel differently. And in fact, our weekend service, our weekend ridership is up significantly because of that, because of the way people are traveling. So I think that's one opportunity to look at that. We obviously will have to look at the fare structure as we go forward. What is the balance there? And then there's this other issue of bus and the bus part of the system, and how do we do that? What do we want to do there? So that all gets into that larger discussion that needs to be had about the future of the agency and the future of service in the region.
Right, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I might, you began to speak about my next inquiry to you. So I do realize over the last few years pre-COVID, the changing in the services that the system had. Weekend services, I frequent, whether it's shows or sporting events in the city or in the region, and the time for service to conclude, those hours began to, be closer to 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever. So is there any consideration, would that consideration be made by the board itself on expanding those service hours, and of course, the rates for the off-peak?
Yes, in fact, we were, during the height of some of the improvements we had to make, the maintenance improvements we had to make, we had reduced the weekend service from 2 a.m. till midnight. We brought that back to 1 a.m. pre-COVID. We were just literally at the launching pad to start to do that. And so we want to continue to do that, but we need to take a hard look at what the travel behavior is at that time of day, and are there other alternatives we can do. During that period, for instance, when we went to midnight, we actually worked with Uber and Lyft to, in effect, work with the restaurant and hotel business to basically provide those rides home, because if they came in by us, but they still need to get home past that time, we had worked a relationship where we all sort of came to the table with some dollars to make those trips happen. But again, in the scale, things were relatively fewer numbers of trips there. But in terms of the region as a whole, obviously, there's a lot that goes on later into the evening, so we want to continue that service, a high-quality service, until we close. Historically, we would start to ramp down to 10 p.m., and what we're looking at is keeping that at a pretty high level because people are moving more at that time as well.
All right, and lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Lastly, so the services on your equipment, right? So the 7,000 series, there's some challenges currently. The 6,000 series that were cycled out for a while, and now you're bringing those back. As those, the 6,000 series were on the shelf, are you finding a transitional challenge to get those ramped back up, to come back into the system? I don't know either.
Sure. Yeah, the 6,000 series, about a year plus ago, there was a coupling issue where we had a decoupling, right? So basically, there were certain things that we had to do to get that, to correct that. Again, it was something that was in the cars that we had to fix. So we're doing that. Right now, as we do that, we have to get the parts, which again is the challenge right now. And then when we do that, we have to test them for safety, and then we get the Safety Commission's approval. So there's some lag time in that, but we've been very aggressive in timing that up as much as we can. Just so you know, different parts come from 3 different continents that we're wrestling with right now. But we have improved with the number coming back, and we have a series of those that we can continue to bring back over the next few months.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you all could keep us in the loop as that transition is occurring. So,
Yes, Senator,
thank you
we'll
very
do.
much.
Senator Salem.
Senator Jackson kind of hit already what I was going to bring up about the 7,000 series and the 6,000 series and the difference of, I guess, of the style. But working in car repair years ago, going back in my time, working for a car repair at Bethlehem Steel, I knew working with them and how trying to get the parts and getting the right parts and making sure that they're not, this thing is not going to happen again. So we know by decoupling and things that are happening, how serious something could happen. But the same question, where are we? And I think you kind of answered that, and making sure that how fast we can get back to 7,000 series. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, just on the 7,000s, we are in the process of finding, in effect, the root cause, so that then we can come up with a mitigation measure. So that's being head by the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, as well as the MSC, the FTA, and us, and Kawasaki, the manufacturer. So we're all trying to get to what is really caused. So we know the symptom with the wheels that are starting to pull apart, but what's causing it to do that, so that we can focus on that. So that's why we took the 90-day pause, so that we could do that, and not focus as much on, trying to get these things out every day, which we were getting minimal out. And to be frank, the ridership is very low right now. So right now, we're maintaining a 12-minute headway on the red line, and we just announced a 20-minute headway on every other line. And what that means, basically, on the average per person, means you wait 6 minutes or 10 minutes, right? Because it's on average. And then if you're in the core, it's much sooner, because we share a lot of tracks. So from an endpoint, it's that. So right now, with the demand, I think we can more than handle the demand. It's not the quality of the product that we want, but that cannot be dealt with until we get the 7,000s back.
Thank you, General Manager Weederfield and Deputy Secretary Lewis. Just want to say thank you all for your commitment in reference to transportation. It was very enlightening and encouraging to see the state of good repairs and the decline in the backlog that was actually taking place. So just want to say thank you all for your leadership. Please give my warm regards to the Secretary himself.
I definitely will.
Yep. And thank you also, Mr. McCulloch, in reference to your very detailed analysis, as always. At this moment, I'd like to end the budget hearing for MDOT WMATA, and now we'll move up to MDOT Motor Vehicle Administration and bring up Budget Analyst Kelly Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the subcommittee. Kelly Norton. I'll be presenting the Motor Vehicles Administration budget analysis. The MVA operating budget increases $4 million to $211.1 million in fiscal '23. The capital decreases $3.8 million to $34 million. MVA aims to implement efficient and effective processes to provide exemplary customer service. One of its methods in doing so is alternative service delivery. This includes transactions performed online, at self-service kiosks, by mail, or the call center. MVA's goal is to have 69% of all transactions completed through ASD. Exhibit 1 shows that MVA exceeded that goal in fiscal '21 with 70.8% and expected to increase in fiscal '22 and '23. MVA also aims to keep transaction costs below or at $16. The average transaction cost in fiscal '21 was $17.77. after being abnormally high due to the pandemic's effect on operations. Costs are expected to be above the $16 goal in fiscal '22 and '23. MVA also measures its customer service through average customer wait and visit times. The goal is to have a wait time below or at 25 minutes and a visit time below or at 40 minutes. Exhibit 3 shows that wait time has decreased from 18 minutes to 13 minutes in fiscal '21, and that visit time has decreased from 28 minutes to 25. Both are expected to increase in fiscal '22, but remain below the goals. The majority of agency spending is operations at 35%. The $4 million increase in operating costs is being driven by increased personnel expenses such as salary increases, retiree health insurance premiums, and overtime compensation. There's also been an increase in postage, electricity, and increased funding to its tuition reimbursement program. Personnel has stayed mostly the same for fiscal year '22 and fiscal '23, but MVA has added 6.5 contractual employees on the operating side to support the continued Real ID implementation. The 2022 through 2027 Consolidated Transportation Program, or CTP for MVA, totals $121.8 million. Exhibit 6 shows the steady decline of capital expenses. This can be contributed to the completion of its Customer Connect project in fiscal '23 and the completion of the renovation of the Glen Burnie headquarters in fiscal '24. Exhibit 7 shows the projects and programs funded in the '22 through '27 CTP. The total cost for the 3 major projects is $12.8 million in fiscal '23, with a total cost of $138.8 million. There is $19.8 million in system preservation in minor projects for fiscal '23. The first issue deals with digital driver's licenses. This past fall, Apple announced it will be adding driver's licenses and state IDs to Apple Wallet, and that Maryland will be one of the states to support this new technology. Chapter 142 of 2019 authorized MVA to issue electronic credentials in addition to paper products. Digital driver licenses are also known as mobile driver's licenses, or MDLs. These MDLs can be convenient. They allow a person to only share information needed for a transaction, such as age, without revealing the additional information on a paper license. This is also known as data minimization. There is the ability to not have to hand someone a physical item. The phone can be held up to a scanner. Also, they're believed to be more secure and less prone to counterfeiting. As with any technological advance, there are potential privacy and security issues. While Apple has stated that neither it nor issuing states would know when or where users present IDs, that is not a given for MDLs. The best practices for MDLs in general are still being worked out by various organizations such as the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. If MVA were to issue MDLs outside of Apple, there is the possibility that the state or a third-party vendor could have access to where a person is presenting the MDL. There's also the potential for law enforcement officers to look through someone's phone if the officer physically takes the phone to scan the MDL and not simply scan it while the owner holds the phone. Giving the officer the phone could be seen as consent to search. MVA should be commenting on when it expects the introduction of MDLs on Apple Wallet and other platforms, in addition to discussing any impediments to implementation and plans to address security and privacy concerns. The Department of Legislative Services recommends that MVA submit a report detailing how it will handle privacy issues with residents' information in future iterations of MDLs. The next issue relates to the ongoing impact of COVID on MVA operations. Since June 2020, MVA branches have been operating on an appointment-only system in conjunction with self-serve kiosks. MVA has attributed its lowered visit and wait times to the appointment-only system. MVA should comment on the likelihood of keeping an appointment-only system post-pandemic. The Real ID Act deadline has been pushed back until May 3rd, 2023. As of October 2021, 84% of holders of state-issued IDs had Real ID compliant products, while 16% did not. Of those without Real ID compliant products, approximately half have old IDs with no documents on file. 25% have old IDs with documents on file, and another 25% have Real IDs with no documents on file. NVA should comment on the primary impediments into bringing these customers into Real ID compliance. In summation, DLS recommends adopting the following narrative requesting a digital driver's license report that should include agency's policies that will safeguard privacy as these electronic credentials are introduced in future iterations, estimated costs for the necessary infrastructure to read/scan digital driver's licenses, proper training on how to use the associated technology, and any necessary legislation needed to ensure successful implementation. And DLS also recommends concurring with the governor's allowance for the pay-go budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Norton, for your very detailed analysis. At this time, I'd like to bring up Deputy Secretary Powell and Administrator Nizer and your team.
Better get my glasses. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman McCray, Senator Jackson, Senator Salling, Senator Edwards, and Senator Edwards, before just a point of personal privilege, I know you're retiring. Thank you for all your collaborative and your thoughtful collaboration over the several years here with MDOT and all my other roles in state government. So we appreciate it and wish you well on your future endeavors. Thank you. For the record, I'm Sean Powell, Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. Secretary Reports does send his regrets today. He does look forward to participating in future hearings. It is a pleasure to be before you today to discuss the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration's budget. We want to thank Kelly Norton for her thorough review and professionalism during this entire process. At MDOT, we are dedicated to providing Marylanders with the best customer service possible, as well as ensuring the safety of all of our roadways. MDOT MVA has made tremendous strides to improve customer service, especially over the last few months with the final phase of Customer Connect. Customer Connect gives the customers and partners greater access to all of their information online in one place and further enhances MVA's premier customer service. MVA is also home of the Maryland Highway Safety Office, whose Maryland Strategic Highway Safety Plan covers the years 2021 to 2025 and provides the framework for our safety programs. The Highway Safety Office partners with all of our local jurisdictions to adopt a strategic highway safety plan in a way that works for them. Jurisdictions with local state highway safety plans currently implemented: Baltimore County, Cecil County, Harford County, Howard County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, the City of Salisbury, and Washington County. Currently in progress is Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, the Town of Bel Air, Calvert County, Carroll County, Frederick County, Queen Anne's County, Riverdale Park in Prince George's County, and St. Mary's County. It's very important that the locals develop these plans so that we can work together to save lives, and we would appreciate your support and partnership to encourage the local jurisdictions to adopt these plans. We're all proud of the work MDOT MVA accomplished in 2021, and we look forward to their continued success this year. I would now like to turn it over to MDOT MVA Administrator Chrissy Nizer to address budget issues and recommendations. Chrissy?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Sean, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Mr. Chairman, as well as members of the committee, it's great to see you in person, and a pleasure to be here. We are very excited about our Customer Connect rollout that completed in December of last year, so that brings everything to completion. Our vehicle rollout is now complete and the driver rollout. So we have that 360 view of the customer we've been talking to you about for many years, so that's very exciting. With that, customers can create a My MVA account, and that's something we'll be talking about a lot in the the coming months. That gives them complete access to their MBA business, whether it's letters we sent them, whether it's the dates of their renewals, or if they're a CDL driver, their medical certificate, their vehicle registration, VEEP requirements, all of that just in one place. We're really excited about the access that gives our customers. So we want to encourage everybody to go online. You can do that right from our website, mba.maryland.gov. On the left-hand side, there's a link, create my account. I think we'll be actually sending you guys something that you can forward out to your constituents if you would be so kind, just to help us get the word out on that. I would really appreciate it. Also, as part of that rollout, we implemented a new secure Maryland driver's license number. This is something we've talked about for a while because the SoundX number we previously used as an algorithm starting with your last name and your date of birth. We recognized that there were individuals out there creating websites and other places where you could try to determine what that was. And so now any customer receiving a new Maryland driver's license or ID card will be getting that new Maryland ID. They don't need to take any action, so no need to do anything additional. We will take care of that when they come in. But importantly for our partners, that Maryland ID number is cross-referenced on everything, so we get that question a lot. What if somebody in my bank or somebody else has my SoundX number? Is there anything I need to do? And the answer is no, because if they contact us with that number, we will access the new number as well. As part of our new system, we also rolled out a new appointment system and the ability to get text and email reminders. So you'll get a reminder about your appointment through text if you choose to provide us your phone number, and you can actually check in online through either that email or text. So that's a nice feature. Actually, 56% of our customers have taken advantage of that, so that's exciting. There's also a new queuing system that opened, and that helps integrate everything. So again, is that 360 system from the time a customer makes an appointment till the time they come in till the completion of the transaction. So we have now more information than ever, which only helps us improve that customer experience long term. We are seeing that wait time reduction, which we're really excited about because we know customers are busy and want to get about their day. So in comparing to FY19, where we were 25.1 minutes, we're down year to date to 20.3 minutes. So I think that's a fairly significant reduction, and we're excited about that. But it also enables us to do more things outside of a branch office. So we'll also look at those alternative service delivery numbers, and we're up to 77% as our most recent month to date. So obviously a significant portion of our transactions, and we do continue to look at those goals. Now that we've fully implemented Customer Connect, I'm confident next year, hopefully when we're before you, that we'll be talking about a new goal because we need to keep moving that forward. CDL holders, that's really an important aspect of our business that we continue to focus on. I am happy to say that we've been able to cut down the wait time for our CDL skills test appointments by half. That's been a real focus that we've made. We're also working with our employers who are interested in being part of our employer testing program. So originally we had 15 employers throughout the state. We're up to 19, and we've got 11 others who are working through the process. That means they can test their own employees to be able to get them that CDL license more quickly. Also, our staff is really critical to everything we do. We couldn't have gotten through the last 2 years without them. I'm constantly praising their good work because really they've been on the front lines this entire time. So we were able to create a new prevailing wage so that all new employees as well as our current employees have been moved up to a step 3. We were able to do that within our own budget and some assistance from MDOT. So we're pretty proud of that because we think it's just important to make sure our employees are appropriately recognized. Deputy Secretary brought up highway safety, and certainly that continues to be a major focus of us, working together with our partners at the federal, state, and local level, trying to drive those numbers to 0. We are pleased, and we want to make sure you're aware, because I know this is a question that comes up frequently. Highway safety data is now available online. So we've got a new website working with the data owners. That's Maryland State Police, because the crash data is their data, and also the State Highway Administration, another important partner. But if you go on our ZeroDeathMD website.gov website now, you can find fatalities by month, by jurisdiction, by type of crash. So really some useful information. I know that comes up frequently back in your community, so something you can refer to folks to. It does get updated frequently at the beginning of every month, and so we appreciate any additional feedback you'd like to provide us on that. So with that, I will turn to the DLS recommendations and review those. The first, in terms of the mobile driver's license, it certainly is an exciting development that's coming. And Maryland's really played a key leadership role as the technology has moved forward. As many of you remember, we had a previous pilot we participated in along with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. About 500 MDOT employees did that, and we worked with some liquor stores as well as the casino, and actually did a demonstration at Oriole Park as well, just to see how it will work. Subsequent to that successful pilot, we did have legislation introduced and passed during the 2019 session. That does give us enabling authority, so a mobile driver license can be presented in the same way as a physical driver's license and can be accepted as such. The benefits, as were enumerated in Ms. Morton's testimony, are that you control your data. Not only do you have to say that your data can be transmitted, as opposed to handing a physical license over where they see all the information. If it's an age verification, the only thing they see is your photo and that you're over 21. They don't even see your exact date of birth. And so from a privacy standpoint, we're really excited about that idea. We are using that minimal data approach that was mentioned. And we're also committed to implementing a solution that's consistent with the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO. It's really remarkable that these international standards have been developed so quickly, but it is because there's such a demand for this technology. So not only a solution that we'd implement with Apple, but any other solutions we implement would be consistent with that. I do also want to mention, because I always think it's important to say this, it's a completely voluntary product. Nobody has to get it. It's an addition to that physical product. And so for those who aren't comfortable, certainly we understand that, and we know that it is not for everybody, but there are many who are excited to get that. With that said, I'd be happy to provide a report to give you additional information, not only on the standards, but our implementation as that moves forward. On the second question related to appointments, it is important to note that for Maryland, we did have a robust appointment process even prior to the pandemic, and we were really fortunate to have that because many states did scramble. We are actually up to about 31% of our customers making appointments. And really, that response was very positive even back then. They appreciated the sense of knowing whether they'd be able to come in and leave the branch during a very quick time period. But what we did realize is for customers that didn't have an appointment, they were not having that same experience, because by necessity, by prioritizing appointments, everybody else was waiting a little bit longer than they would normally wait. And so as the pandemic began, we were able to quickly pilot to that all-appointment system that allowed us to create a safe environment in our branch offices, obviously not just for our customers, but also our employees. We have now increased the number of appointments available, and I think this is important to recognize. We're not only at pre-pandemic level, but in many cases above that. So we are not, at a diminished volume in terms of the number of appointments that are available out there. They do offer the ability to more efficiently serve our customers. What we saw before, there'd be peaks and valleys during the day. A lot of folks would rush in the morning thinking, that would enable them to get in and out, but unfortunately that volume would sometimes create a bottleneck. So the benefits of appointments is it really allows us to create that great customer service experience for all of our customers, not just a segment of the customers creating the appointment, but for all of our customers. We've also added we've learned a lot about appointments during this process, so we've added some functionality that we heard from customers that they were interested in, so you can make a same-day appointment at no additional fee. So you just go in, you can only make it 2 hours, or it has to be 2 hours in advance. We don't want you to make an appointment a half hour from now and not be able to make it. But there are a lot of appointments, just looking, I go in there just to check 17 branches. You could get in the same day for a driver appointment. Even if you wanted to take a non-commercial skills test, there were 9 branches that had the ability to do that. So it's really a robust process there. We've added priority appointments for customers when we have to cancel their appointments. So if it snows, for instance, and we close a branch, as we would even pre-appointment time, we can get those customers in more quickly by establishing them as a priority. We also have that reminder system that I mentioned in terms of the appointments, and it even offers them the ability to wait in their car. So say they're not comfortable coming in, being in crowds for whatever reason, they can actually wait until their number is physically called to be able to come into the branch office. Now, if a customer would show up at a branch office without an appointment, which we have not seen a lot of, but if they do, there are several options that are available. Managers and supervisors have the ability to schedule same-day appointments or, put them later in the day or another day at their convenience. But there's also the ability to schedule them or bring them in at that time. So we recognize sometimes maybe you have an elderly customer, mobility might be a challenge for them. We'll go ahead and serve them at that time to ensure they get their transaction taken care of. We also do tag returns, as well as self-service kiosks, which was referenced in the analysis without an appointment. So based on the customer feedback, the efficiencies, wait time benefits, we really think that all appointment process provides the very best possible customer experience for all of our customers. And for the last item, Real ID, we continue to move forward to make sure that we meet that new compliance deadline, which is May of 2023. We're doing really well. In fact, we have one of the highest compliance rates in the country with that 85% rate. We do have less than 200,000 customers who have products that have an expiration date either past May 3rd of 2023 or will not be eligible to renew, because as you remember, you helped us extend that time that a customer can come in to renew now to 1 year, so we'll take advantage of that with Real ID. Of those 200,000, about 30,000 and a half have their documents on file already, as was shown in the analysis, and the 162,000 customers don't have their documents on file, so we'll be reaching out to them to help them get compliant with Real ID. I also think it's important, especially as we get close to the deadline, to remember the Real ID driver's license or ID card is not the only thing you can use. You can use your passport, some military documents, or some other things that you can use to board an airplane or for other federal purposes. And I would like to point out that we have tried to find creative ways to help people come into compliance with Real ID. We now have 3 branch offices, including Frederick, Baltimore City, and Essex, where we're offering birth certificate services. So several years ago, legislature enabled that. We've issued, just in a short period of time, more than 1,200 birth certificates. So that customer, prior to this pilot, would have had to walk out to the MBA without their driver's license or ID card. Now they can get not only that birth certificate for no additional fee, only the fee that is required by the Department of Health, but also get that driver's license or ID card all at the same time. So we think that's a really great step forward from a customer service standpoint. So with that, we obviously concur with the DLS recommendations related to operating and pay-go actions, and we'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the very in-depth report. I had an occasion to use the facility during our COVID for the last year and a half, and very efficient, the appointment process, the check-in process, to ensure that I was still going to make my appointment. And so I'll definitely give you kudos on that. I mean, I think it works very efficient, and congratulations on that point. Could you speak to the overtime, well, the impact of COVID on your employees, the vaccination percentage of your employees, or that process, and the measures you have in place as you're navigating that, and lastly, the overtime, that's cited in the document in Exhibit 5, is that a typical overtime amount, or does that have something to do with COVID? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Jackson. Certainly, as I mentioned, we can't do anything we do without our employees. It's been tough, I'm going to be honest, because, you know, even for those 5 or 6 weeks where MBA was accordingly shut down to the public, there were folks coming to our building every day. They were creating driver licenses and mailing them out if you went online and asked for that, titles. All of those critical processes we really are critical to, including supply chain. We had folks coming in giving commercial driver testing when we were supposedly closed. So, you know, it has been tough on our employees. We've done everything we could think of, learned a lot along the way. We now got plexiglass, as you probably saw when you came in, that's dividing the employee from the customer. I've communicated to our employees that is a permanent change. That's not going to go away once COVID goes away. We've also provided PPE. In fact, we just issued KN95 masks recently to all of our employees, including multiple masks to our driver license agents who really have that more personal interaction or more direct interaction with our customers. We are doing skills tests for non-commercial outside of the car. So for our examiners, it's been tough to be out in the elements, but you know, I've said to them, we're going to let the health department drive the decision of when you get back into a car. For commercial drivers, we don't have a choice. The federal government tells us we have to do that. But for non-commercial, we've been able to come up with a test that's safer from a COVID standpoint, but it puts them out in the elements on cold days and hot days. It's, although we try with fans and cooling devices, it's still difficult. And so I feel like they have responded remarkably at every turn. They have, stepped up to the plate in ways I don't think anybody knew that we even could. So I'm so grateful to them. In terms of vaccinations, we were fortunate to be able to work with MIMS. So our employees were able to go there and get vaccinated, those employees who chose to do so, and obviously we followed the DVM guidelines in terms of leave and all of those things, and the extra pay that they get for being vaccinated, and we have been encouraging that certainly as employers. So we'll continue to evolve just like I think, employer has had to do, but certainly at the MBA, we are completely focused on the employees and what's in their best interest.
So I will give you kudos again. So I got appointed last year on opening day, January 13th, and I got appointed to replace can't replace him, but to fill in District 27 senatorial seat of the, President Emeritus, Senator Thomas V. Mike Miller. And what's interesting is when your agency and the President's office offered each member, your license plate for that particular district, it was astonishing to me that you guys had a District 27 Senate tag, because in all of my years, I've never seen that tag on his car because he was the Senate President. I guess from your store's perspective, you guys had it. It was amazing. I thought you all would have to. I think I spoke to you. It's like I'm not sure if we have that tag, because he never had a District 27 tag. At least not in 33 years. So kudos to you all on that one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem at all. Senator Edwards.
It did exist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, if I might. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for all you've done throughout the years. We've had problems with kiosks, talking about our delegate and state tags, if you remember. So I don't use a kiosk anymore. But you did get it straightened out, so.
We have a special process for Senator Edwards.
When there were a couple of times they couldn't figure it out. They had to call down there to get it straightened out.
Got it straight.
There's a definite need, and we all know that, for truck drivers these days. Have you noticed any increase in the state for CDL license applicants?
So yes, it's a challenging problem nationwide. We are increasing our capacity. We even had a second school bus driver day to focus on that issue in particular 2 weeks ago. We weren't able to fill all the appointment slots we had. It's just a tough industry right now to be able to attract folks to. We all know the difficulties I think all employers are having in terms of attracting new employees, but trucking industry in particular. There are some things that we're doing in addition to these special days where we try to encourage folks to come in. We are working with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration on a modernized test. The test has not changed in a long time, and for those of you familiar with it, the pre-trip inspection is very long and not consistent with how vehicles have evolved from a technology standpoint. We're one of 3 states currently piloting this new modernized test. We petitioned FMCSA to allow us to, it's only being done in Glen Burnie and at one of our private entities, our third-party providers. We petitioned FMCSA to allow us to do that everywhere, because we think that simplified test will at least take one barrier away for our potential CDL applicants. We're still waiting to hear back on that. I am hopeful. We've gotten some positive indication they may move forward, but I'll keep you updated on that. I think that's one thing we can do to at least get folks into the industry. We're working collaboratively with the Maryland Motor Truck Association. There's things we've done with the Customer Connect rollout. CDL drivers for the first time can get an 8-year license. Before they could only get a 5-year, even though everybody else could. Their medical certificates now can be submitted online, so employers can take care of that process without anybody having to come to the branch. So we're definitely looking at it from all components, but it's a nationwide, and frankly, our Canadian counterparts are telling us the same situation in terms of attracting folks to the industry. It's not a simple solution for this one, unfortunately.
So if you live in Maryland and drive just in Maryland, not out of state, can 18-year-olds get a CDL license? Only
Yes,
to
you can
operate
get an
in Maryland?
intra-state, yes.
But it's federal law across.
That's right. There is a pilot
They
that
are working on that, are they not?
there is a pilot that they're looking at to try to explore that, but we're still waiting for additional guidance on that.
Are you involved in any commentary on that?
Yes, we
With the
are. In fact,
feds?
we were just talking about, I just had a call right before this with my colleagues throughout the country when we were weighing in on that.
And you talked about the appointment system, I'm not sure I gathered all of that, but you have to get an appointment. If you're getting a driver's license or renewing a license, you have to get an appointment?
Yes, so we are currently an all-appointment system now, if you're using the kiosk, which I know you love, or returning a tag, which now we have the Dropbox, which you were also instrumental in
And thank
helping us
you
to
for
get
that.
done. Neither of those require an appointment, but everything else does require an appointment. And I
But-
can assure you, Cumberland, you can get same-day appointments for anything. Even commercial driver's tests, that's one of the places where you can get in very quickly.
Well, I did have to renew my tag about a year or so ago, so I walked in, they said, have an appointment, I said, no, I didn't know I needed one. I said, well, go ahead, they didn't know who it was, so it didn't make any difference.
No, and that's what I said. If we don't
But-
have, folks waiting, we will certainly accommodate folks that walk in. The appointments are really there to help, again, smooth out that process so that we can serve customers in the best way
I
possible.
understand that, but I just wanna make, for licenses,
Yes.
you have to get an appointment.
Yes.
For tag returns, you don't have to get one. at
So
this
normally
point.
tag returns, you don't have to make an appointment, no, because it's just the tags being
So I
returned.
might suggest, because I didn't, when I walked in, I didn't know, and we don't have a whole bunch of media in our neck of the woods, you might want every once in a while, put an article in the local press out there or on the radio or something saying that, our process now is you want to renew your driver's license, you need to get an appointment, here's who you contact. If you're turning in your tags, you don't, but we would like if you did, I'm assuming you're saying that. And then I'm hoping, and I don't follow it that close, the branch office in Oakland, are we still operating that on a regular, 2 days a week
Yes, sir,
scenario?
we are, yes. And I will take that as a follow-up item. We'll follow up with the media up in Western Maryland, make sure we get that message out a little bit more.
I'm glad the Dropbox is working.
Dropbox is
That
working, and
wasn't
now
my
actually.
idea, it was my staff's idea, but thank you.
So, and for everyone's benefit, every every full-time branch office will have a Dropbox in the next few months. Actually, we had to do construction to do that, but again, that allows people to drop off their tags without having to come in if they're not comfortable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Salem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all the information, and I have to go to the MBA, I just got my information, so I gotta review it myself. But the digital driver's license, is that available throughout the state of Maryland, easy, accessible for those that would like to do that?
So it's not quite yet available, so we will put out notices and certainly make the committee aware. We're working with Apple in partnership with them. So anyone that has an Apple phone will get that notification as soon as it's available. We are also working with Android providers because we don't want to leave our Android phone holders
better not.
out in the dark. So we will be making an announcement at the appropriate time about those devices as well.
Thank you. And one more thing, Mr. Chair. I know in our area, it's been really bad with mail. And the information that we would get from the MBA, getting our mail has been a problem. People have been getting their mail 3 or 4 months late. And hoping that we'll be able to show some mercy to those that get their information late, and then we go there, I'm hoping we'll be able to work with them.
100%. Yeah, we've been working on those issues, and actually the new My MBA service, they can see
Yeah.
the mail that we sent to them online, so it's another reason to encourage customers to look for that. But we've certainly been doing that. In fact, we've made it so if you didn't get your registration renewal stickers, you can just go back online and order them again within a certain period of time, because we've seen so many, and we're getting so many calls of people not getting those renewal stickers. So we've even changed our systems to try to help with some of the mail issues that we unfortunately have seen. But yeah, definitely encourage folks to sign up for that My MBA, because everything's there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Administrator Nizer, I know I tell you every time that I talk to you, but you are one of the more responsive, probably efficient agencies to work with. I think that it was well stated during each and every response that was there. So just been very much a delight just to work with you. Thank you for the respective report. Thank you for helping us navigate Real ID, Veet, now Apple ID. And please send the regards over to the secretary. Ms. Norton, just thank you again for your due diligence in reference to the analysis. Colleagues, seeing no further questions, this ends the hearing for the Motor Vehicle Administration, but it also ends the bill hearings for today. Thank you. You have a blessed day.
Thank you.